right 2 lanes to keep right.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Prepare to Go There. I don't know why I just choked on my air, but I'm so glad we are together again talking about the necessary and unnoticed preparation that goes on with a lifestyle of preparation. We've got to put in the work today so that way we can show up ready. My name is Peter, and it has been a joy to go on this extended coaching journey with so many friends and leaders alike. Many of you are just crushing it in a variety of spaces. You inspire me to see what you're doing in media, to see what you're doing in business, with your families, in ministry. You're dreaming up movements, and you really are carrying the torch to be a light in the future. So thank you so much for making this investment in yourself and in those that you care about, those that you carry through your leadership and your example. We're going to have a really powerful conversation today. It's really essential that we are helping our teams to go the distance and make a difference. And so that's why we're going to be giving you a tool that you can be leading by example with. And then hopefully this tool will become a conversation that just goes deeper and deeper in the culture of your team, in your organization, and help everyone get empowered with this idea of time budgeting. So welcome back or welcome aboard to the Future Frontier. We are constantly challenging one another to keep the future on the front burner. So many times the things we talked about, prayed about, dreamed about, they just drift to the back burner in one way or another. And so we make this time and we show up again and again to put the future back on the front burner where it belongs. Nobody else is going to do that but us. So let's take ownership of today. It's my observation and experience that most people don't know how to lead others into a better future simply because they don't know how to lead themselves there first. And so the theme of this entire video podcast is self-leadership. And that's where Prepare to Go There steps up. It is a call to action to friends and leaders alike who want to lead themselves and stay focused on the future. How do we actually practically stay focused on the future? Easier said than done when you can try to escape to the future. You can daydream some fictitious version of a better scenario than whatever you're trying to get out of at the moment. But to really stay focused on the future, that takes a lot of self-leadership, a lot of vision, which produces a lot of discipline in our lives. And that's why we want to figure out how to lead ourselves day by day and then lead by example over time. So if this resonates with you, go ahead and take this as an invitation to join the Future Friends. That's the email community here. And that's how I can share great content with you and also stay in communication with you as more opportunities to hang out show up. And as new projects come out, you can do that in two ways. You can click the link below and it's in the description, and you will find a free gift. It's a PDF called the Fail-Proof Planning Guide. I'll mention a little bit more about that at the end. But getting the download will put you in the email community as well. And if for whatever reason it's not there or not working on the video you're watching, then just go to peterbirchfield.com and you can get in there as well. So I want to continue our conversation about time budgeting. What is it? Why is it important? Basically, time budgeting is a self-leadership best practice that we can use to verbalize everything that's going on in our 24-hour or 168-hour world. And as we begin to just kind of talk out all the things that we know about, all the things we're expected to show up for, all of the projects that are going on, all of the obligations, all the fires we're putting out. We just kind of put everything out there. Where is your time going? You put everything out there on paper on purpose. You're verbalizing it, you put it on paper, and then what happens is, whether it's very messy in a mind map or whether it's a little more structured in some sort of chart or graph, um, you start to visualize. Okay, so first step is you have to verbalize this. Second step, you get to visualize this. You start to see where your time is actually going. And you're like, wow, I didn't realize I'm doing all this stuff. And that is helpful to a degree, but we can still have some skewed views of what we're involved with. And so time budgeting steps in and says, okay, that's good, but let's start with a zero sum budget, the same way you would budget your money. Let's budget your time. If you had $100, let's figure out where all that went, or let's figure out where all that will go. And so let's just do the same with time now. Take 24 hours. Where's all that time going? Or use it as a diagnostic. Where did it go? So you can do it either way. Diagnostic, meaning figure out what happened, or you can do it a little more proactively, use it as a decision-making tool, figure out where it can go, where it needs to go, where will your time go moving forward. And this is important that you go through those first two steps, verbalize it, visualize it, because you got to talk it out and then admit what you see, because you can talk about things very casually and not realize the impact of where your time's actually going. And you basically can look back at everything you put on paper and you put it through this time budgeting process and you say, wow, I feel I get why I feel so spent now. I understand why I feel so mentally frayed, why I feel so emotionally drained, why I feel so taxed on everything I've been putting my time into, because there's a tax that comes with every hour you're spending. You're actually spending a little bit more time on recovery, or a little bit more time on putting out fires, or a little bit more time with the switching cost and the opportunity cost. And so you have to admit that this is happening, that you've literally been spending your time into 1,000 little things instead of being intentional and proactive and fully, deeply investing yourself in a few really important things, a few high value things, or a few high leverage things. And so budgeting your time is kind of that boring, basic habit that we need to be doing. And we know it's good to budget our money, and yet we don't always do that with our time as well. So that's what I want to help with. This is now going to take the conversation out of calendar debt, which is just doing the first two steps, realizing, oh, wow, I'm in debt. My time, I'm in time debt. I have overcommitted. I've overextended. I see waste in my time. There are leaks in the boat. There's no way I could take on new stuff because I'm draining all my time on all this other stuff. And that can be really frustrating. So that was kind of the big idea for calendar debt. And then we moved it into big goals, which is plugging the leaks in the boat and then getting a plan for big goals to finish projects. And that's where you isolate one particular goal and you try to describe what it looks like in the future. What does it look like when it's done? Define what done looks like. And then that'll help you just get some data. It doesn't mean it's going to happen exactly like that. Hopefully it'll turn out a little better than you expected. But then you can have enough data to begin to reverse engineer from finished to focus and say, what are the steps and stages that get me to that outcome? And then when you have this, it's as best of a guess as you can make. And the more you do this, the more proficient you become in this process. But then you can put a little estimate. How much time do you think it'll take? How much time do you think these steps will take? How many? And then you add up those. Generally, it's going to be in hours. But, you know, if you're doing things like 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, that's a pretty small project. I'm talking about big goals. So you're thinking of hours, and then you add those up by stages. You say, okay, it's going to take me this much just to get through stage 1, this much just to get through stage 2. And then that's the real game. You take that knowledge, you take that insight, and you are now equipped to have a better weekly planning session. You're more equipped to have a better monthly planning session, a better getaway. You realize what you need to make happen in the calendar. But if you're just sitting down saying, well, I'll just kind of write down what I know about, and basically you're just copy pasting everybody else's expectations into your own calendar, you're not actually making your own plan. You're just staying up to date on what's going on with everybody else. I don't know. But this is where you actually have some information that can be useful to design and guide your days. And then you say, wow, I remember yesterday I said a goal might be 70 hours. I don't know. That was just a guess. It might be way more, but 168 hours is a week. So let's just say this is going to take you 400 hours. That sounds so crazy right now, but I'll just throw it out there. 400 hours to do this project. Maybe so, maybe no. And then you're like, how do you even fit 400 hours into a week that's only 168? It doesn't fit. And so now you have to break down that big number, that big goal into steps and stages and say, well, I can't even fit 400 hours. That would basically be calendar debt. Calendar debt is when you, to use the universal example here, whenever you procrastinate a big college project and it was supposed to take about 400 hours because it was the whole semester or whatever, and then you wait until the last week, and now you're definitely in calendar debt because you literally only have the last week. You only have 168 hours, and that is really not all for the project. I mean, a lot of that has to go to eating, sleeping, living, doing other stuff. So then you really are breaking the bank. You're staying up early, staying up late, and just totally spent. You're going to end up totally spent. And some people pull it off because they just do shortcuts, or maybe they work well under pressure, and that's their life, and they live off of that adrenaline, and they wonder why they feel so spent so often. And then when it comes down to some of these bigger life goals, they're spending their time in smaller numbers. They're spending their life away in ones and fives and tens, figuratively, instead of making bigger investments in life in hundreds and thousands, bigger investments, even more than that, right? And so they say, man, I didn't get to do all those big things in life. I wonder where it went. Well, it's probably because you were just spending your time in the smallest increment possible instead of figuring out how you're going to invest the next decade to do something really big and meaningful to your mission and your life's work. So those are crazy questions to ask. How am I going to time budget the next decade to something meaningful? Pretty important. It can be done. And no, you're not going to get down to minutes and hours. I don't even know how many minutes go into a decade. But doing these exercises at the smaller end, the days, the weeks, the months, and time budgeting there will make you much, much more aware of how you're paying attention, what you're paying attention to, and you'll be a much more wise investor of your time. And hopefully you'll get to the point where you're making better choices. You're just making better decisions about where your time is going. And now you're not spending your time on things that waste time and procrastinate and then put you in calendar debt because, oh no, you really had to do something, but it will cost you more time than you have when it finally falls on you as the day of reckoning. That's calendar debt. And you pivot, you shift the weight of that into being more proactive, being more intentional, and you can actually do things today that will set you up in the future. You can make better choices today that can build habits, that can start rhythms, that can organize systems that will actually multiply your time in the future. And there's a lot that we can talk about with that. So here we are, kind of importing this personal tool, which is really helpful to get us out of calendar debt and then focus on big goals and actually fitting them into the calendar in a realistic way. And now we're going to import that into the teamwork, into the team ethos, into the workplace, into whatever you're doing with, how you're interacting with other people in work, ministry, community, whatever. Your organization will benefit from this as well. And so this is really leading by example now. And I'm sure that there are all kinds of, systems and reports that involve time tracking, and that's cool. I mean, if you've got some heavy duty team development going on, great, more power to you. Some people dread that. When it's done well, it can actually help the entire organization thrive. For me, as long as it's staying in that empowerment space, if we're handing these tools to people to empower them, not stifle them, micromanage them, lord over them, right? But I get it that it can be really frustrating when someone is like, basically hanging over you like a vulture, just waiting for you to roll over and make a mistake, and see your projects die, and then boom, they swoop in. That's it's a pretty morbid example, but a lot of teams have that kind of pressure and that kind of criticism going on in their culture. So I want to use time budgeting as a encouraging, empowering tool. Let's inject some help. Let's inject some hope into our teams. And I think that this conversation will do that. So I want to kick it off with a quote here. And as best as I can tell, there was a man in kind of around the time of World War I, and Sergeant Alvin York is credited, as best as I can see, to this phrase. But really, more broadly speaking, this quote kind of comes from the military space. And you'll see this where people say, Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. Now think about that because I'm going to help your team get on the fast track. We're here to talk about how we can use self-leadership best practices to improve the working quality of our teams and then encourage and foster better work relationships as well as force multiply the working results that come out of the team. So relationally, we're going to get better, and culturally and organizationally, we're going to see more results, more revenue, more points going on the board. So this is a very helpful insight from I would consider a high pressure environment, the military, very high pressure environment. And look at the way they approach this with their team development. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. When you get in these moments where it is literally life and death, it is literally make or break, you have to have a very, very low margin for error. You can't make mistakes in that environment. It's not okay to say, oops, sorry, under those conditions. It really does matter what we do. And so the amount of preparation that's going into those high pressure moments of performance happen when you slow down long enough to work on the mechanics, to work on the muscle memory, to work on the process, to work on yourself, and thereby work on your team. And you go so slow that you're working through those mechanics, you become very smooth. You become very proficient, very competent, very excellent. Now it's like, going through this workflow with your eyes closed, with, your hands, like you know this workflow like the back of your hand. It's very intuitive to you now. I've talked about that cycle. You start intentional, then it becomes intuitive. Well, first, no, let me rephrase. You perceive something intuitively, you work on it intentionally, and then you practice it until it becomes instinctive. So you're going through that cycle again and again. Now, this quote comes to us to help put our teams on the fast track. And I'm going to describe why teams break down. I'm going to paint a very familiar picture for many of you in where teams get off track, where they get derailed again and again. It's actually when teams are trying to move too fast. When they're trying to move too fast, errors can creep up, mistakes, assumptions, and we're not hitting this principle. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. There's a time where you have to go slow, and you're doing it intentionally because you want another time where things will start going faster. And really, for those of us who are preparing to go there, we have to go. We expect things to speed up. And that's on a variety of ranges, right? We expect things to get crazier. We expect increasing crisis. Things are going to be moving faster in our world. We can't say, "Oh, please slow down and let me have a little more prayer time. Please slow down and let me learn how to be a better leader, how to be a better parent, how to be a better communicator." When you're thrown into the moment, you're not going to just rise to the occasion. You're going to fall back on your preparation. So take advantage of the slow time you have now. I was thinking of that scripture. Why hasn't the Lord come back yet? It's because he's being patient. He's being patient. His passion, his desire is that all would be saved. So he's being patient right now. Don't, every day that it's not raining, right, is a day to be grateful and keep working on that arc. Now, Jesus is the ark. I'm not talking about that. But the point is, every day there is sunshine. It's a day for preparation before that flood. And we want to be taking advantage of the slow times, taking advantage of the downtime. And even as a team, you're like, hey, I don't really know what's going on with the team right now. You know what's going on? You're working on the first part. Slow is smooth. Get things smoother. Get things smoother. I thought I was my brain's kind of going wild now. So let me say to my outline, but slow is smooth and smooth is fast. When you get your teamwork in alignment, when you get your teamwork really organized and you empower your team with this tool of time budgeting, it's going to help them. At first you do have to slow down to do time budgeting. Yes. You have to slow down, sit down, verbalize it, visualize it, organize it, obviously. But you get in a habit of that, and it becomes more second nature. It becomes more accustomed to it. It's part of your language now. Then you can move much more quickly. You're empowering more and more people. It's not one genius that is micromanaging 100 happy helpers. That's the Jim Collins analogy. But it's empowering everyone in the team to think like this, talk like this, work together like this. And that's how we begin to move faster. Everyone's empowered to lead. You know, you might hear this phrase, stay in your lane. I get what it means, lead from strength. But you may need, it's more than that. It's more than just stay in your part. What if we need to cross train? What if we have to lean on each other? So empower everyone on your team with some time budgeting, and we'll give you some examples to do that. So I want you to realize that teams are moving right now at the speed of trust. Right now, the way you judge or evaluate or measure speed in a car, how many miles per hour, that's the metric, that's the gauge, miles per hour. The way you measure speed on your team is with trust. How much trust is happening? Because that's where communication is happening. You can't move as a team quickly without agile communication and ongoing communication. A lot of updates to keep things going in real time, to release and empower people to go do great work. You have to have trust for communication. You have to have trust for decision making. You have to have trust for follow-up. You have to have trust for execution. You have to have trust for so many areas. Teams are moving right now at the speed of trust. Now, you may be throttling a team, but if it's not really running off of genuine relational trust, it's going to have some sort of burnout in the engine. I've talked about that before, where you have to do pit stops, like on a road trip. You have to have these pit stops, or even just with your car maintenance, and do relational maintenance. Have an intentional pit stop instead of an inconvenient breakdown on the side of the road. And so many teams, they start with a few group of friends that help them, believe in them, get them going, but then they don't level up as leaders. They don't level up for the organization. And so then they're just basically borrowing relational trust to build a team. And then they go too far, too fast, and they break down because they didn't do the relational maintenance to say, hey, things are moving faster. Things are different. We're in a different context right now. We're on a team. How are you doing? How are you leveling up? How are you leading yourself? What can I do to supplement your systems? How can I get you coaching or get you self-care or whatever that looks like? Like, we want this team to thrive. How are we going to do that? So trust building is very important. And I heard the way it was presented to me, which was very helpful. I watched a video on YouTube, and it was put out by the Village Church, and they were describing the difference in personal integrity versus professional integrity. And if you don't have integrity, your team cannot trust you. If you don't have personal integrity, your team will not trust you. And we know the power of integrity, but the way it was presented to me was so helpful. There's a difference between personal integrity and professional integrity. Personal integrity says, I am who I say I really am. It's about authenticity. Hey, when you see me online, when you see me at a at a wedding, if we're visiting a friend at a wedding and, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing? Catch me up. How's life? How's the wife? How's all this stuff. And we're interacting, we're talking, and you're kind of wondering in your head, is this really them? Right? Personal integrity is saying, I am who I say I am. I'm the same person in private as I am in public. I'm the same person locally as I am digitally. I'm the same person. And we're growing in that personal integrity. It's not about being compartmentalized where we can hide, but it's about being integrated where we can shine. And that's important. That's necessary. And I think a lot of teams, particularly in nonprofit or ministry, we put a high premium on personal integrity. Are they a person of integrity? But we don't evaluate our teams and trust off of professional integrity. Because here's what's happening. We're seeing some breakdowns in teams, and we're saying, what's happening? They have, I believe they're a good person. I believe they have good motives. I believe they don't, I don't think they want to like purposefully sabotage things. What's going on? And if we're not making this distinction, we're not seeing the breakdown in trust. And there's a breakdown at the trust level. You're like, what do you mean trust? I trust them. I think they have character. Yeah, but do they have professional integrity? See, professional integrity says, I will do what I say I will do. Professional integrity says, I will do what I say I will do. It means you're going to get the results. Remember, there's two sides to healthy teams: relationships and results. And in a great team, it's not tug of war. It's not where one has to win over the other. Actually, your relationships thrive when they are getting results together. I mean, what does it mean to be mission minded? And vice versa. If you're going after great results, the right results, you're going to grow deeper relationships with the people that have the same values and that you appreciate having great skill sets to bring to that project. So teams have to learn how to trust each other. And this trust gets played out in these two different veins, the relational and the results. So for one, teams have to trust the way they're going to work together. Teams have to trust the way. If your team does not trust the way they're going to work together, the way they're going to communicate openly and honestly, the way they're going to speak the truth in love, the way they're going to, keep the conversation on topic instead of kind of spinning out of control into all of these lesser things, kind of getting in the weeds. Teams have to trust the way they're going to work together. And teams have to trust the way they're going to work through things. So maybe you trust a person relationally, but do you trust their workflow? Do you trust their systems? Do you trust their work ethic? Do you trust the results that they're producing? And you got to be honest about that and say, hey, I think this is kind of slowing down our momentum. Like, I want to ask you, can you honestly have that conversation with someone? Can you say, hey, I enjoy working with you, but I really don't trust your workflow right now. I don't trust your time management. I don't trust that if I put something out there, whether it's in an email or whether it's in a project management tool or whether it's in a team meeting, I don't really trust. Can you have that conversation? Can you be honest about that? Because if you can't, you're already at risk. If you cannot even have that conversation without some sort of emotional blowout, without some sort of, someone getting defensive or something getting taken out of context, you already need to pull over. Stop driving. Stop pushing for business as usual. Stop everything, what you're doing right now. Go find a team mechanic. Go take that team into the shop. You have to do relational maintenance, because if you can't even have that conversation, how are you going to go even faster? And what happens is this trust erodes over time, just with the wear and tear of life in the fast lane. And then out of that, calendar clashes bring on team crashes. We're not able to speak openly and honestly with our team. Maybe you can't even speak often enough with your team, whether it's people you report to, the people in the peer level, the people that report to you, whatever. You're not able to communicate honestly, openly, and often enough. And then everyone is creating their own calendars, their own agendas, their own. And I'm not saying agenda like in a negative sense. I'm just saying they've got their own life. They've just started to pick up their own stuff. And it creates this fog of war scenario where we're not really in sync. And now we're expected to go on the front lines and go do stuff together. And then there are these team crashes. When we need people to be there for us, they're not. When we expect something to get done, it doesn't. When we're banking on those results, they fall through. And then we say, "What happened?" Right? And you can lash out, and you have these crashes in the team, a crash of confidence, a crash of competence. You say, "What happened?" And then we start to unravel and we start to figure out, "Oh, well, I had this on my calendar and I was expecting this." And it was just a lack of these expectations creating so much miscommunication and frustration, and it was not needed. I'm telling you, it was not needed. It could have been prevented if you had the working relationship well maintained and you had that open, honest, often communication. You could identify calendar clashes ahead of time. Identify calendar clashes and say, "Hey, whether it's a moment hanging out together, a meeting to talk or work on something, or, a milestone that you're trying to work towards together, all that stuff should be laid out, lay of the land. You should be able to see a little bit into the future, whether it's a few weeks, a few months into the future at least, and say, "Hey, I'm noticing there's a calendar clash here. Can we talk about it? Can we work on it? Because I don't think you're using the same data as I am to get to some of these decisions." And so you want to be on the lookout for this. If you care about your team, if you care about the people you work with, you're going to be looking for these blowouts in terms of internal or even external, more so internal relationships, external results. But if you care about your team, you can actually get ahead of it, get in the preventative position. And I'm telling you, I know that this sounds a little overboard. This might seem a little overbearing. It might seem unnecessary to the team, particularly if it's a smaller team. Like, we don't need to put everything on the calendar. We don't need to be intentional to that degree. We all basically know what we do. That doesn't really change that much. No, no, no. If you care about your team, you're saying, hey, this is not just about being all professional and polished and organized. This is about being stronger in our relationships moving forward. This is about us understanding one another better, supporting one another better, preferring one another better, collaborating with one another better. This is a tool that's going to help our team internally and externally. I want to see, I don't need to see your whole life, but I need to see what you're thinking. How do you actually see us moving forward as a team? Because if we can map it out when things are slow, then we can all speed up. We can all move faster in our own respective ways. We can stay in alignment and we won't get derailed. And this calendar may seem unnecessary, but it's the safety net. The calendar is the preventative measure that's going to help us get some sort of reading before we all go running. And if something shows up calendar wise on the in the form of a calendar clash, hey, that's not going to work. We've both scheduled meetings with the same people. Hey, that's not going to work. My big project is due at the end of the month and your big project is due at the end of the month. So I'm seeing that we're going to be like bumping into each other and we're not going to have enough margin to, you see what I'm saying? And it is a conversation. The calendar is a conversation tool. It's not just like very robotic and sterile. These are relational tools that can help us verbalize with each other, visualize what everyone else is thinking on the team, and avoid these crashes. And I just ask you very humbly, whenever you have a crash, a team crash of whatever magnitude, do an autopsy and say, was this clear? Was this on a calendar? Were we on the same page? Because apparently it doesn't look like it. And see if what I'm describing would actually have prevented that. Could it have actually prevented that? Maybe it could, maybe it couldn't. But look ahead and use the calendar as a way to draw people out and say, hey, I want to hear what you're thinking. I want to see what you're working on and how your workflow is going to pan out over the next few weeks. I know you have big goals on your end of the team. I have big goals on my end of the team. And so the calendar is actually going to integrate us as a team to make sure that our personal calendars are in alignment with the team calendar, and our team calendar is preventing some of these team crashes moving forward. Now, that's easier said than done, right? I mean, most people don't even use a calendar. They don't use the calendar effectively. I'll be honest, I do not use a calendar to reinvent the wheel every week. I don't do that. I have a calendar with big rocks and time blocks. That's my calendar approach. And I use the calendar to improve my own personal rhythms and to inform team systems that I want to work on better and better. But no, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel every time. I'm not like super geeky. I don't have that time. If I put 1 hour in a week, that's a win for me. 1 hour in to get the week out. That's a win for me. So how do you actually coax your team into this kind of proactive, intentional, alert, attentive, calendar-based culture? How do you actually encourage the rest of your team? This might even be senior leadership. And I get that a lot of senior leaders will delegate the calendar and say, oh, I have an assistant. They'll make my calendar. They'll let me know, tell so-and-so, they'll let me know. They'll remind me. They'll do it for me. That's fine. You can automate, delegate, eliminate, all these other things people are talking about. But your calendar is your culture, period. Your calendar is your culture. Your culture is what you actually do, not just what you talk about doing. If it's not on your calendar, I'm telling you, it's not in your culture. And so senior leaders really need to be invested in the way they are shaping their calendars, because you're leading people into shared commitments with that calendar. If we don't have shared commitments, do we even have a team? If we don't have shared commitments, are we even a community? If we don't have shared commitments, are we even doing this thing together, or are we just living these parallel sterilized lives that just kind of nod and notice everybody at a distance, and we just kind of show up and kind of dance around the same room and then go back to our own homes and our own lives? Calendars should be, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm not trying to make this more meaningful than it has to be, but I just think like calendars, when you're actually leading people. Vision casting is great. You can inspire people all day long, but until you lead them to make a commitment, say, hey, I'm expecting you there at that time. I'm expecting you at this place at this time. I'm expecting you to be at these team meetings. I'm expecting you. Please, will you come? What's going on? Where's the breakdown? There's a clash in scheduling. There's a crash in our team culture. I want to pull you in. What's going on? How do you lead people into a more proactive, collaborative, calendar-based culture that will leverage writing instead of just kind of talking around each other? And I think a big part is what's going on in that weekly team meeting. Maybe you can only have a bi-monthly team meeting twice a month or whatever, or monthly meeting, I don't know. But whenever that rhythmic meeting is happening, that standing meeting, it's really important to diagnose that. You got to put a lot of attention on that meeting. And I think you have to fill your calendar up with moments for the team to grow relationships. It might be hanging out at your house, or, grilling some burgers in the backyard together, or going to a conference together. Just letting people be relational, and let that kind of kick in on the front end for those moments. And then you also have to have these meetups and these meetings where you're working on the results, and you're thinking about the teams and the systems and the metrics, and you're really driving on that end too. And your calendar needs to be a healthy blend of both. So your meetings in particular really matter for this. And when you're in the meeting, I want you to be listening for the amount of constraining questions we're asking, the way we lead people into time budgeting, the way we lead people into being more intentional, proactive, collaborative, is asking each other constraining questions. Because what time budgeting forces us to do is work within constraints. Hey, that's a great vision, but we only have 2 months to get it done. Hey, that's a great idea, but there's only like about 40 hours of work time in a week. Hey, I know you're frustrated, but you're talking about a situation that's been going on, building up, slow creep for years, and now you want to have some sort of flashpoint moment where it's all going to get resolved in the next 2 weeks. Like, that's not going to happen. You're basically making each other be realistic. You're saying, okay, that's great, but let's come back to the calendar, because this is where we are in real time. This is what it looks like in real time. I'm not saying that the calendar is the epitome of reality. I go to the Bible for that. But my point is, for us to work better together, we have to have conversations in calendar land, where things are actually happening and where things actually get done. Let's come to calendar land and let's walk through that and see if that's happening. I think it's very funny how many teams will have meetings without ever bringing up the calendar, whether it's the big view, annual planning or whether it's quarterly planning, or you'll have a planning meeting. But what if every planning, let me rephrase, what if every meeting should be a calendar-based conversation? Think of every single meeting you have as every working conversation you have can be a calendar-based conversation. Hey, how are you doing? Tell me, how's life? What's been going on in the past 7 days? That's a calendar-based question. Hey, what's your time looking like in the next 7 days, the next week, next 2 weeks? How are you doing? When can we meet up in the next 2 weeks? I've had you on my heart. I want to hang out. I want to, maybe share some coaching ideas with you. When can we meet? People, someday is not a day of the week. Man, this is hitting me on so many levels. I don't know about y'all, but I mean, this applies to discipleship-based relationships, mentor-based relationships, team building, all the above. We are not constraining people to the calendar. We're not saying, hey, we actually live in time and we only have so much of it, and it's like a budget. You got to spend it wisely. And I know that we had a meeting, but we kind of already spent 4 hours and we can't get that back. And so now you're trying to meet again and email and call and do all this stuff again. And it's not going to work. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. And so we're pulling people out of, basically, we're pulling them out of helplessness. We're pulling them into helpfulness. And we're saying, what can we do now? What can we do in the next 7 days? What can we do in the next 30 days? What is this going to look like? So I really want to encourage you. Your meetings are going to matter, and insert time budgeting in theory or in language or in practice, whatever level of this journey you're on. Maybe you just have to start just clarifying and explaining what time budgeting is for the team to appreciate it. Maybe you have to, you may not be able just to go, and talk through it, walk through it so quickly, because the other people, they're still working on time budgeting individually. So there is a bit of a investment build-up time. But steer your team meetings to the best that you can away from blind faith, away from these blind faith pledges where people say, I'll get it done at the end of the month. Really? Let me ask a few follow-up questions. I call them clarifying questions. Let me just clarify what I heard. Hey, I know you're on it. I know you see it in your head. I'm a little slower right now. Please help me. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I want this thing to get to the finish line. I need to just clarify some things real quick. You mentioned this. What does that mean? You said this. How does that work? I mean, my wife is amazing at this. She's always clarifying me. She's always like, hey, that math, whatever math you're using, is not adding up. You're talking about this project, and she's basically kind of real quick doing some quick math. You're talking about this project. You're saying you're going to do this. It's going to have this. It's going to cost this much, all this stuff. You're going to get this done in 10 days. 10 days. Okay, let me put that into the weekly calendar. Okay, you basically only have like 7 hours of margin in the next 10 days to actually put in said project. Your project is more like 30 hours. How is that going to fit? I mean, maybe there's a lot of, big organizations. They have softwares for all this stuff. They have people, they have project managers that talk about this stuff. That's cool. But let's lead ourselves. Let's help each other. Let's not be, the critic. Let's be the coach. Maybe they don't understand that they're making a blind faith jump. They're asking the whole team to make a blind faith jump. I don't want to ask people on my team, let alone leaders, senior leaders that I'm communicating with, and say, hey, I got this big idea. I'm going to get it done. And let's all make this blind faith jump together. That is a big risk. That is one risk that I think could be mitigated. I think that's a risk that we could step away from. I'm all about taking big risk. I really am. If I heard, hey, this is on my heart, the Lord put this on my heart, I'm going to do it with or without people. I'm like, man, I hear faith. Let's do it. Make it happen. But that's not every day. Genuinely, that's not every day. Most of the time, we have to practice wisdom. Hopefully, all the time we're practicing wisdom, but you know what I mean. Most of the time we're growing in wisdom, and we don't want to ask the people on our team, hey, let's just all make these blind faith jumps. You have to know your numbers. Know the numbers with your projects. Know how long does it take the team to do everything that they already know about? Like, have you taken your team through a time budgeting exercise? Say, hey, everyone has a role on this team. Everyone has shared goals on this team. I want to better understand where your time is going. I'm going to spend some time. I want to interview you. I want you to tell me everything you think you do, everything that you're up to, everything that you're into. You got to be really humble about this process because you really don't know everything your team is doing. You really can't assume that they're doing more than you think they are or less than you think they are. You can't assume that. You have to ask them. You have to have open, honest, often conversations. Look at the numbers and build it out. All right. Collectively, our team has a few thousand hours invested a month. Let's make the most of these hours. I'm not talking about days. I'm talking about hours. Okay. If we get to put in 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, few weeks a month, look at all this hour, look at all this time. Can you imagine what we could accomplish together with all this time? And then where does it go? It goes here, it goes there. It's spent in 1,000,001 little tasks. And a lot of them are misguided tasks. And then that creates all these rifts, all these fault lines, and that creates these calendar clashes. And then at the inconvenient time, there's a calendar crash. There's a team crash. So we have to draw that out. We have to begin to expose these calendar clashes and expose these rifts in the team and ask caring questions, ask clarifying questions. And then if you have the relational rapport with people, then you can go like take the gloves off and just knock them with a good constraining question. Ask a constraining question. Hey, time-wise, I don't see how what you're talking about is going to happen. Can I help? What can we do to change that? And this applies to just the normal routine that they do week in and week out, but it also is really important when you're taking that routine and you build on that the projects you're now giving people. You may realize as a manager, as a team leader, that what you're expecting of your team is unrealistic because you haven't done the math yet. You don't even know what they're doing. And so you're working off of skewed views. You've got incomplete data and you really don't know where they're spending their time. And then you put on a big project and then you haven't even time budgeted the project. So, number one, you don't even know how they're spending their time. Number two, you've cooked up this enormous assignment and you don't even know the time requirement it's going to take. And if you follow the work wedge principle, it's probably going to be more than you expect, than even what you anticipate and estimate. So, man, that is a burden that no one wants to take on lightly. So in these meetings, man, it's so important that we're actually looking at the numbers of time. Talk about time in your meeting. Talk about where time is going. Talk about how you're investing time better. Talk about your values so that way you can better allocate your time around the things you value. We value XYZ. And start to pull out the best in your team members by using constraining questions. Ask them, hey, how does that work in the calendar? We only have so much time. How do you see this going? How much time do you think the project's going to take? How much time do you really think we have on the calendar? And work with them through that. Now, if everybody's in that conversation already and they're on board with this kind of thing, I believe that this can really improve the quality of the team meetings. But maybe they're not on board yet. And that's where this last step comes in, is I want you to lead by example. Before you start turning over tables in the team meeting and you're like, but what about the calendar? And you're like flipping tables because people aren't using constraining questions. I want you to go low, model this by example, try to get a case study in your own work so that way it can be a proof of concept to the team. And then relationally go one by one to your team. Go one by one, everyone in the team, and start relationally offering to help them to budget their time one-on-one. Say, man, I'd love to hang out. I'd love to talk. I'd love to see what's going on. I'm learning a lot about this thing called time budgeting. I know it sounds weird or geeky, but it's actually helping me lead myself. It's helping me stay focused on the future. I would love to help you. Can we just kind of talk? And you take them through the same steps you're going through. Let them verbalize what's going on. Help them to visualize where their time is actually being spent. See if you can identify waste, get rid of it. Maybe you could categorize and then better prioritize where their time can be fully invested into better uses, and help them to realize that this time budget is not just work. This time budget is life. It's holistic. So you need time for yourself. You need time for family. You need time for self-care and working out. You need time for all of these pieces. And it's going to, when you add in all of these sides, I call it multifaceted focus. When you drop all of these sides or front lines in your life into this time budget, it's going to force you to have trade-offs, to see the opportunity cost in these choices, and it's going to force you to be much more patient. And you got to be more patient with yourself. You got to be more patient with your team. And when you throw in a project, you have to say, hey, I know we could probably knock it out in a few hours, but honestly, realistically, it's probably going to take us a few weeks. And I'm okay with that. I've done the math. It will make it work. And it's not just me conceding. It's not just me forfeiting something that's really important to the team. But I'm actually making a strategic choice, and I've done a little bit of homework, and I can confidently say that if we wait, we'll still get it done. I'm not just kicking the can down the road. I'm not just moving the goalpost further and further. I can confidently say that if we wait and if we invest our time wisely, we'll still get the results, and they'll probably turn out better than if we just try to rush through things. I'm willing to go slow because I have a process to make it smooth. And when we go smooth, it'll speed our results up. It'll speed the outcome up on the other end. So that's where I wanted to land this, kind of start with self-leadership and then end with self-leadership as well. You have to trust one another. That won't happen. If you don't have trust, you're not going to be open about where your time's going. And then that can lead to a lot of calendar clashes and crashes. So you got to be a leader, and you got to speak up in those meetings and start asking constraining questions so everybody's thinking realistically. And then on the side, you're being caring and relational, and you're offering yourself as a resource and, hey, I'm working on this too, and I'd love to kind of talk out time budgeting with you and help you out. And I think if you will try that, you'll really be encouraged to see how many people get on board with you. So If you appreciated this conversation, I would love for you to share it with other people and let them know that there are friends and leaders that are taking on the future together. I want to tell you a little bit about the Fail Proof Planning Guide. Again, you can get that for free. It's my way of saying thank you for being on this extended coaching journey. And you can download the link below, which will get you in the email community, or you can go to peterbirchfield.com. Just go ahead and click on it, get in, and download it instantly. And then thank you again. Join the future friends. Help me. Let's break some sound barriers. Let's get this out there, and let's keep working on ourselves. There's no pressure to stay on the whole time, to watch every round. This is just fuel for your focus. And I want to say thank you. I really appreciate going on this journey with you. We're going to finish out tomorrow with Finish Friday. It's going to be great. And we're getting closer to the 100th live stream, which is going to be special. So remember, I'm cheering you on. I want you to put in the work today because you're going places. And so you got to prepare to go there. See you tomorrow.